Hi, my name is Andrew McDermott, and this is the Champions Mindset Podcast. Join me as I dive into the minds of the world's greatest champions and share with you the secrets, lessons, and knowledge that's allowed them to rise to the top. Welcome to our community of greatness, abundance, and fortitude. Thank you so much for being here. It's time to become the person you've always wanted to be. This is episode 6 of the Champions Mindset Podcast presented by First Finisher. We've been away from the show for a few weeks now as we recently launched our newest product, Champion Total Performance Powder, which is an all-in-one daily supplement for optimal athletic performance. You can check that out at our website, www.firstfinisher.com. But today we really have a special episode for you guys. My guest is former bodybuilding champion, weight loss and wellness coach, and CEO of Bodies by Design Fitness Studios, Kris Simpson. Kris is also the author of the newly released best-selling book, The All-Inclusive Diet. Before the show started, I had planned on mainly covering fitness, nutrition, and health-related topics with Kris, which is his area of expertise. But right away, this turned into a much deeper and profound episode. The hour-long conversation I had with Kris was one of the most impactful conversations I've really had in my entire life, and I think it will resonate with you in the same way. At an early age, Kris understood what his passion in life was, and his journey began in early high school with basement workouts, which led to 10 years of hardcore training before becoming a natural competitive bodybuilder. He then went on to be a national bodybuilding champion and carried the message of drug-free sport into local schools by making regular guest appearances and speaking engagements. After finishing a business diploma, he started his own personal training studio in 1998 named Bodies by Design Personal Training. Bodies by Design went on to be a pioneer of fitness training and fulfilled its mission of bringing personal training into the mainstream. In 2011, they again became a pioneer for New Age physiotherapy by introducing Physio by Design, a program that bridges the gap between passive therapy and active rehab. Kris is on a self-described fitness crusade. He spreads the health and fitness gospel by dedicating his life to this cause. As he sets his sights on the future, his crusade will continue by sharing his vision of the health and fitness experience with his clients and children. In today's episode, Kris shares how he went from champion bodybuilder with the world at his fingertips to spiraling into 10 years of alcohol and drug addiction. More importantly, Kris tells his story of redemption and how he climbed out of this massive hole in his life. He explains why this adversity was really the best thing that ever happened to him and turned him into the man he is today. And with that, a mission to help millions of people transform their lives. This is a really powerful episode. A few of the talking points we get into are finding the fear that's causing your suffering, why we need our family, friends, and teammates to thrive, how adversity creates champions, and why you should embrace life's obstacles. We talk about daily habits for overcoming fear, what being a champion really means, and the 5 facets you need to balance in order to live an optimal life. Of course, we also talk everything training and nutrition and what that means to Kris. So let's get into the show. All right, I'm here with Kris Simpson. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Andrew, we had already an amazing discussion, and we sort of haven't even started getting into it yet, right? So yeah, this is the live version, but yeah, we've already covered so many things. I'm really excited about today.
Me too, man. This is going to be great. But before we get into the show, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and the work you do?
Sure. So I have sort of a weird story in the sense that I come from obviously a health and fitness background. I live up here in Toronto with my 2 miracles, I call them, my 2 children, Cristiano and Chiara. And I started working out when I was 14, if you want to sort of start from the beginning.
That's perfect.
Basically in the basement with, the old fitness equipment that has the dust on it that my father used to use. And I picked up my first dumbbell and something magical happened. Actually, something magical happened in my body, and in turn it really changed my mindset or my belief system, and I haven't stopped, Andrew, since I was 14. Like, I've had periods like anyone where maybe we're not training as much or maybe not training at all, but I've always come back to it. Like we were saying pre-show, it's basically people look at us and say we're crazy, but this is why we're doing it. So we don't go crazy. Right? Like that's the whole point. Like this really
Exactly.
keeps us, it keeps us intact. It keeps us focused. It keeps us balanced. And that's why we keep coming back to it, almost on like an obsessive kind of level. And I guess that's why people look at us and say, well, you're crazy, look at all of this focus and time and energy and effort that you put into this, but we're really doing it for sort of those internal real reasons, right? So yeah, that's where I started. But I got into bodybuilding when I was in my early 20s, and I had to compete down in the States. Again, I'm from Canada, but we didn't have any drug testing up here. And this is sort of, as we get into it, this is why my story is a little bit weird. But I was a drug-free athlete. And that means I just wasn't taking any performance enhancing drugs, steroids, etc. And I couldn't compete up here in Canada. Actually, I did, but I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to. I wasn't winning shows. I was placing third and second because I wasn't competing on a level playing field.
Yeah.
Because most of my competitors, my friends actually were taking these kinds of drugs, and I just said no. And I had to go down to the States, and I went down there because they had drug testing, and it was the best thing I could have done because sort of my amateur bodybuilding career just took off. I started winning shows. I won the Mystery New York State, for example, the Natural Bodybuilding Federation that they had down there. So I did really well, and I competed for about 5 years and sort of went all the way that I could within the natural federations. And that was sort of my ceiling. And I couldn't go beyond that because to go beyond that would mean that I'd have to take those performance enhancing drugs, which I already said no to. So that was where that sort of started and where it ended. But then I got into the fitness club business, and I've got a personal training club. Actually, I've had it for 18 years up here in Toronto. And we also have a rehabilitation clinic as well, which I guess we'll talk about later in the show, how those two work together, the personal training and the rehabilitation that I do at Bodies by Design up here in Toronto. But this is where sort of there was almost like a 180, I guess you could call it, where I really digressed and hit my bottom. And that's when I just couldn't deal with life on life's terms in regards to running a small business and dealing with that stress, trying to raise my children and obviously put something back into my marriage. And I just collapsed. And basically my bridge to safety was drugs and alcohol. So that led me to becoming a full-blown addict and alcoholic, which that lasted for about 10 years, Andrew. And
Wow.
yeah, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And that might sound, again, a little weird. Here's this guy that has been preaching health and fitness, owns a fitness club. I won Mr. Canada up here, amateur bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, and here I am, a full-blown addict, alcoholic, completely devastated, out of control, and, basically committing suicide slowly. That's essentially the best way I can explain it to you, right? So that's sort of the weird 180 part of my story where I hit that bottom. Going to rehab is where I bounced back up. And this is sort of what we were talking about pre-show here. This is the interesting part of it. I really think that when I was focused on health and fitness and the bodybuilding, that's what sort of delayed what was, I think, almost my destiny. I was destined to sort of, hit that bottom, and I just chose the route of substances, right, to obviously assist me there so that I could rise again after my fall. But I really think that health and fitness and bodybuilding, starting when I was 14, that really was sort of step one for me. It was the first phase. The second phase was doing the work or the workouts on my mind, okay, and basically really trying to come to terms with life, and you can call it spirituality if you want. There's lots of different names for it, right? Seeking sort of inner awareness, right, and self-awareness, these kinds of things. That's what I've been doing for the past 5 years since I've been straight and sober, and that's sort of my phase two. I don't really know what the phase three is, Andrew. I'll let you know when I get there. And maybe there won't be one. I don't really know. But I just know that this is sort of the second step to my life where I went very far with my body. But now I'm really trying to expand my mind. And let me tell you, Andrew, how hard it is to maintain your physique, right, with health, nutrition, and exercise and all these kinds of things. But boy, your mind right, is much more complex, I find, than your body.
Yeah,
But they really
absolutely.
go together. It's that cliche, mind, body, spirit. I hate saying that cliche, but it is true. Like, basically moving your body, your mind will follow. So there is a connection there. There's no doubt about it. And that's why you and I, we get into this exercise thing, is because, indirectly, we're really reshaping in some cases our mind. But now I'm really taking a direct approach. And a lot of my exercises are for my mind and developing my mind in sort of that self-awareness and understanding myself, because really I'm usually the only one in my way, Andrew, right? From all of my dreams and all my aspirations. So if I can sort of get a grip on myself, then really I'm going to have freedom to explore all of the successes that I want to see in my life.
Absolutely. So obviously there's a lot going on there, and I want to get into quite a few things, but I want to hit that rock bottom point. And what were some of the biggest mindset shifts that you experienced that you were able to dig out of that hole?
Yeah, there's one word, Andrew, and it's called surrender. And it's a word that most people have a hard time saying. It's putting up that white flag, right?
Yeah, most people associate it with weakness, with giving up, and
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And essentially, Andrew, I had to surrender to win. That's what I had to do. So I had to basically understand that I was at the bottom. I was on my knees, and I really had to lift a hand and have another hand pull me up. Right, and that hand was the groups that I got involved in, the 12-step groups that were everything that I needed. It gave me basically the support to let me know that I'm not alone. Right, this is not a weakness. This is something that actually can be a blessing, which I've learned over the last few years. That's exactly what it is. But that's really where it all started, was me sort of giving up, and I stopped resisting. The fact that it wasn't working anymore, Andrew. Like my life, the way I was managing my life was not working anymore. Right. And I had to give that up, and I had to basically have a clean slate and start all over again. And that's very difficult, right?
it is, yeah, because you have to admit you were wrong, what you were doing wasn't working, and
Yeah.
that's tough to
Yeah.
do for anyone, especially someone like you, like I, who's obviously very competitive, and you never want to be in that spot, or kind of think that you failed, but sometimes that's what you got to do. You didn't fail. It's just a setback. You're not.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful point, because that's really what I'm constantly dealing with my weight loss and wellness clients. I'm a coach as well. This is what I'm focused on these days, last few years, and that's sort of, me giving back what I learned over my fall and rise. And basically, there's a connection that I can see between my suffering with substance abuse and the suffering that I see other people going through with obesity, for example, or just being overweight. There's a certain level of suffering, and there's a certain amount of surrender that's needed, and help that is needed for these people. And I'm telling you, Andrew, it's sort of strange to say, but there really is a connection, and that connection between like substance abuse and being overweight, or any of those kinds of physical or mental problems, is the fact that we need to acknowledge that there's a tremendous amount of suffering, and ask ourselves, how much more do we want to suffer? How much longer do we want this to endure this suffering? And then second of all, when are we going to put that white flag up, and then another hand to ask for a hand to pull us out of that hole that we've dug for ourselves?
Yeah, man. I mean, you got me thinking a lot, and especially what you said about how this has been the best thing that ever happened to you, and me myself, I completely agree with that personally. When I was at the lowest point of my life, and battling depression, anxiety, and a lot in the same spot you were. Now where I am today, I would never change it. Would I want to go back and re-experience it? No, but I wouldn't change a thing, because it makes you who you are, and that's the thing. That's what champions do. They let their hard times, the adversity, create them. And that doesn't happen for everyone. That's the truth about it. And obviously, if rose colored glasses, you could say everyone that happens to everyone climbs out of it, but it's not. Only the strong survive.
Yeah, and you hit on a point there. Like you just told me there, and I didn't know this. So thanks for letting me know about the anxiety and the depression and sort of the emotional, disturbances and turbulence that you've had in your life, right? And that's exactly what I'm pointing to when I say that there's sort of this common thread that we can call suffering, right? And that's basically, our inability to, like you said, say, hey, listen, I'm wrong. I need to make some changes. I need to ask for forgiveness. I need to, make some apologies, some amends, like all of these things that typically we avoid. And by avoiding all those things, we just stay in that state of suffering, right? So yeah, almost it would almost be a good thing to find what that suffering is, or find where that fear is that's causing that suffering, and to try to find it as quickly as you can, so that you can start dealing with it, right? And opening your mouth, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm breaking the silence here, Andrew. I just wrote the book All Inclusive Diet, got released last month on Amazon, and in that book, it's got the story of my struggle, and that is me coming out of the closet, so to speak, because I've never talked about this, Andrew. Like, this has been my dirty secret for the last few years.
Yeah.
The fact that, I'm basically an addict and a full-blown alcoholic, right? That has recovered, but still, 10 years of living that way, right? It didn't make all the friends that I should have. I made a lot of enemies, and I did a lot of stupid things. I can tell you lots of stories about that, but yeah, basically, figuring out that common thread exists with all of us, and where it's coming from, where that suffering is coming from, and breaking the silence, or doing what you need to do to get out of that hole that you've dug for yourself. Like that's really where the champion's mindset is, right? And all of our holes are different depths, Andrew. They really are. It's all personal. Do you know what I mean? Like, I still had my house, I still had my car, I still had my business when I was in my hole, right, at the deepest level that I wanted to go to. I was suffering spiritually. I really was. I felt like I lost my soul. I really did. I didn't believe in anything outside of my own suffering. That's what I believed in. I didn't believe in a higher power, or whatever you want to call it, right? Something that's sort of bigger than me. I had no faith. I had no hope. So, getting down into that hole, right, is where you need to be to sort of see where the light is. And the light's always going to come from another person, another human being. Like, we need each other, Andrew. That's what I've come to the conclusion of.
Oh, I completely agree. To go back to, my own struggles, I understand how hard it is to talk about it. And, especially for me, it has been being younger. It's not the cool thing to admit. It's not, for some people, it doesn't even seem real, because those kind of things don't happen until it happens to you. But I was in a place I didn't want to be. I was in a place where, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any people that loved me, or I loved. I had a great job making more money than I knew what to do with. I was living in a place most people would call paradise, but I was miserable. I was depressed. I really wanted to get up most days. And what fixed it was when I came back to a place where I loved to be around people that I loved. And like you said, it's the people, it's your team, whatever that team is, your family, your friends, who you work with, your teammates in athletics. That's everything. Without it, you're really nothing.
Yeah, you hit on a really cool point there. The fact that you said that, not a lot of people your age are talking about this, but that doesn't mean that's not happening to them. And I'll tell you
It
right now,
it
Andrew,
happens to a lot more people than I
it
think
does. It
it
does.
does.
It's just we're not hearing about it. That's the thing, right? Because there's a certain amount of insecurity. The younger that you are, typically, especially with things of this nature, right? Emotional things, and emotional, you could call it, weakness, or it could be perceived as that. And you just haven't, at a young age, you haven't been in that state of suffering long enough to do something about it. Right? You're not ready to talk about it. So it's going to show up later. But if you go back and connect the dots, you'll find that it's going to happen in your teens. That's where it always
Yeah.
starts.
And that's
Right?
why
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to come out and talk about it as much as I can, bec- because I know there are so many other people who are dealing with it. And maybe some people might judge me for it. Maybe some people might say that's a weakness, but I don't care. If I can help one other person, that's all that matters.
Yeah. And what I found, Andrew, sort of myself coming out and writing this book, which does have my story of struggle in it, is, people aren't coming up to shake my hand or anything like that. But I have just as much respect or more respect, I think, with a lot of people that do know where I have been. It's easy to look at us, Andrew, like we've got the physiques, right? We've put a lot of time and money and effort and focus into sort of building our bodies up, and it's recognizable to everybody, even when you got your clothes on, for crying out loud, right? So, for us to show sort of, hey, listen, we're human and we make mistakes, and then, if we've already made the corrections, then it's basically, it's really difficult for people to even think that we could have went as far as we have went with the suffering, that we endured.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that, and it's any type of champion, athletes, CEOs, great entrepreneurs, great writers. You see them at their end game when they're at the top. Like you said, you see where they are in their end game. You see the finished product, and that can be discerning for most people because they think, oh, I can never get there. This person has always been like that. They've always been great. And it's the opposite. Every great person was once in this hole because that's what made them great. That's how they discovered who they are. That's how they either fell or they rose.
Yeah, yeah.
And having a podcast like this, talking to someone like you, I think it's such a powerful message because people understand that the struggle is just part of the journey, and it's actually important to embrace the journey. There's actually a great book by a guy named Ryan Holiday called "The Obstacle Is the Way." It's based on a lot of philosophy and stoicism, and he just talks about how these obstacles you face in your life, you don't need to be. You're not going to be happy they're there. They're not going to bring you joy, but don't let them destroy you to a point where you're paralyzed. See them as opportunities. Every struggle is an opportunity to become the person you want to be.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I am right now, Andrew. Like, I've got basically a few things that I do every day as sort of rituals and habits, and I'm doing them. I'm doing them for me so that I can keep sort of flying at a high altitude, right? Where I'm feeling more feelings of gratitude, happiness, joy, all of those kinds of feelings, and avoiding sort of the fear-based feelings, right, of envy and jealousy and anger and resentment and all of the like. And those things, for me, starts off first thing in the morning, first things first, right? I don't get caught up in anything else. I get my morning meditation done, and it's nothing, like a monk would do or anything like that. It's pretty simple, really. I just close my eyes, I relax, I repeat a prayer that's got a lot of meaning for me, and basically my mind expands and everything sort of falls into place. It's almost like defragging a computer, Andrew. Your mind is well, the computers were based on someone's brain, basically, right? In the way they compute things and store things, and our brain basically gets fragmented with all the disturbances and distractions that we have every day. So we need to sort of get things back into order within our own minds. And in order to do that, you got to be in a state of relaxation, right? So that's what I do every morning. I spend 20 minutes doing that. I've got a gratitude journal. Some other things that sort of forget where I am and what time it is, which essentially tell me that I'm where I need to be when I'm not worried about the past, or the future, where I'm completely present and I don't even, like I said, know what the time it is. It's basically when I'm sharing or when I'm supporting. So right now, Andrew, I'm supporting, basically, right? I'm telling you and your listeners on this podcast, I'm letting them know about my struggles and sort of my fall, my rise, and how I did it, right? So that's the supporting part of the socialness that we all need as the human species. But there's also sort of the sharing component as well, and I find that that's what you're doing with me right now. So you actually shared your story of the depression, the anxiety, and sort of the emotional issues that you had at a younger age, right? So sort of getting that off your chest and breaking the silence, and me sort of on the other end supporting you by telling you my story as well. It's that social sharing and supporting. That's where I'm flying at a high altitude. That's where I feel like I'm a champion, right? And that I can keep going, that there is no ceiling. So those are the things that I do every day to make sure that, I can continue flying at that high level. And also, I haven't forgotten about working out, Andrew. I'm still walking, which is something new for me. Not too many bodybuilders were into walking. It didn't serve any purpose, right? Like, why do you need to walk? We got cars, right?
Yep.
So walking and working out, and I basically I walk and work out my mind every day too. So it's
I can't.
sort of that's my basic day, Andrew. That's what sort of I need to get done in order to make sure that everything else gets done. And even if it doesn't get done, I'm still going to feel okay about it, and I'm not going to be, a nervous basket case and lose my stuff, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
What you all hit on there is just incredible. We could just talk for hours about what you said, but a few things that really stood out for me. One, the walks. Walking has always been a huge part of my life. I love taking walks, just clearing your head. You can't say enough about relaxing, about detaching yourself from day's worries and struggles, and putting away the phone, the email, and just reflecting in your own mind. Still to this day, my biggest battle is with anxiety, and especially with starting a new business. Still working for a financial firm down in Florida. The days are full, man. 16-hour work days, 7 days a week, and the anxiety is definitely the biggest obstacle. But being able to just relax your mind, and one of my biggest realizations as well is us people listening to this podcast, we all have these huge goals, but realizing that you're happy right now. Don't let life pass you by, but just taking it day by day and enjoying every day.
Yeah. Well, we call that gratitude, right? And a friend of mine, actually, he's got a beautiful little journal. It's called the 5-Minute Journal. UJ Ramdas, actually, here from Toronto. And this 5-minute journal, Tim Ferriss has talked lots about it on his podcast. And
yeah, absolutely. I've seen that a ton from Tim Ferriss.
Yeah. It's fantastic, Andrew. It's literally 5 minutes. It ties in with your morning and your evening ritual, and it basically gets you to think about what are you happy about today, right here, right now, and write it down. And if you got to fake it till you make it, that's fine too. But you're going to have to spend, 5 minutes thinking about good stuff. And I'm telling you, man, that really changes the direction. Like I've almost done self experiments, Andrew, when I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, so to speak, and nothing seems to be going my way. I really pay attention to sort of the rituals that I've incorporated in my life that are allowing me to fly at that high altitude that I mentioned. And the 5-minute journal is one of those things. And I'm telling you, Andrew, right after I do it, I feel different. And I'm trying to be subjective about it, right? Like I'll do it and I'm like, okay, how do I feel? I'll ask myself that, right? And I genuinely feel better. It's wild. It blows my mind that something so simple, thinking about what am I grateful for today? In fact, what are the 3 things that I'm grateful for today? How that can completely change your thoughts and your behavior and your emotions.
That's something I actually just started doing. It's not the 5-minute journal. I forgot where I heard it from, but I've been doing it for 2 months now, and every night when I go to bed, and I'm laying in bed, most of the time, I'm still thinking about work, still stressing out about something, and every night I think about, first, 1, what I'm thankful for, and then 2, what am I proud of that I did today? And at first, like you said, yeah, it was kind of like fake it till you make it. It's like, all right, this is, what's this all about? And then all of a sudden, at night, that's the first thing I think of, and it just calms my mind down, and it puts in perspective what's really important in life, and that, you got all these worries, everything going on, but every day there is something to be thankful for and something good that happened.
Yeah, we spend so much time, Andrew, sort of, you mentioned the rose-colored glasses, but just that's the sort of external, extrinsic, we could call it, viewpoint that in our human nature, we're all wired for it, to sort of look outwards, right? What's going on out there, right? Is it good or is it bad? Let's make a determination here. And our ego steps in to sort of protect us, right? And avoid this and do that and yada, yada, yada. And before you know it, like, we need a defrag, right? Just like a computer does. So that's why basically going internal, self-reflection, what am I grateful for today? What is that one thing that, you ask yourself every night, what is that one thing that really went well today? If 10 things went shitty, like there's that one thing, right, that went well, then wow, that's all we need to sort of change our frame of reference, right? But you need to sort of completely change the perspective and look intrinsic, right, or self-reflection in order to change your thoughts and your emotions and your behavior.
And what you said before too really resonated with me when you're talking about, to you, being a champion is how you're helping people now with sharing your struggles and your story. And I want people to really think about that's really what a champion is. People listening to this show, we all have very high goals, aspirations. We want to be top athletes, top performers. But at the end of the day, being a champion is really about being the best version of yourself. Are you happy with who you are? Are you getting better and growing as a person, emotionally, spiritually? That's what a champion is if you're the best person you can be.
Yeah, you said that really well, man. And, hats off to you, brother, because, obviously at a young age, I think you just made that huge leap from your own state of suffering where, you ran for daylight, right? And you found it. And you basically took this giant leap in your life, which, there is no ceiling for you. It's, you've, as I say, you've basically burst the bubble, because that's all that was holding you back. That's all that's holding any of us back. It's just a freaking bubble, man. Do you know what I mean? So when you pop that bubble, right, and typically you're going to need help to do that, right, which means that, hey, you got to get honest with yourself and you got to get honest with other people. Watch what happens. That bubble is going to break, and there's sort of this expansive universe that you can explore and experience and go after just about anything. I know it sounds sort of pink cloud, woo-woo and all the like, but I'm telling you that's my story, and that's how I see it with everyone else that sort of busted the bubble, and that's what I see within you.
Yeah, I agree. When you kind of burst that bubble and you realize that, first of all, you kind of realize your own small part in this universe and everything that's going on, and how to not take it too seriously, how everything that's really going on, one day we're all going to be gone. When you realize kind of the smallness of everything, it really frees your mind up to believe that, yeah, anything is possible and that you can change the world. You can do things that are impactful, and you don't have to just go through this life living an ordinary life, the one that everyone told you. But, first of all is realizing it's there.
Yeah, keeping it small, simple. How do you do that? We talked about walking, right? Walking basically is something that is simple. Obviously, we can all do it as long as we have two legs, and it's really sort of small. You're going out into something that doesn't have a lot of distractions in the sense, but it's a paradox because it is really the expanded universe, right? Like you really see it for what it is in all of its glory. And the same thing happens, with any type of meditation, which, Andrew, for me, like meditation, all it is focusing on something that has some meaning to you, right? And holding your focus intermittently, okay? Because we're humans, and obviously there's nobody that can turn their brain off or just focus solely on one thing, but just to try to focus on one thing for as long as you can for a period of time. It's almost like in the athletic world for dancers and for figure skaters, for example, they use a technique called spotting. And what spotting is if they're into a tight spin, and Andrew, you've seen these figure skaters or even dancers spin, it's just like, how do they keep centered and balanced and poised?
Oh, it's crazy,
right?
Yeah.
It is crazy. But they use this technique called spotting, and all it is rotating their head so that they stay fixed on one spot that they've chosen, right? So that allows them to keep spinning, okay? And the analogy there is we feel like we're spinning in life sometimes. Like there's so many things coming at us, and it's like, where do we turn? It's like, I'm getting dizzy here, right? I feel like I'm not centered. I'm not rooted or balanced. I'm going to fall over, right?
Yeah.
The thing is with us, all we need to do is focus on something. For example, maybe it's a mantra. For others, it might be a visualization of a calm, peaceful place that they spent some time with earlier in their life. Maybe it's, a tropical beach, for example, whatever it is. Maybe it's music, right? There's just so many things that we can focus on that are very, very simple, right? That allow us to give the same effect that the dancer or the figure skater has, that we're focused on that spot. The world continues to spin around us, but we get some relief and we get some balance, and we get rooted, right? We get centered.
Yes. I mean, that couldn't be a better metaphor for that. That's awesome, man. So now I want to shift a little bit into getting more into the fitness nutrition. And you mentioned before that you're the author of a new book called The All Inclusive Diet. And I
Mhm.
would love to know the details on the program, how it works, and why it's different than other diets out there, and what inspired you to create this?
Yeah. So a part of it obviously is my own struggle, right? So
Hmm.
I obviously want to help other people that are struggling, not with addiction, for example, right? But more specifically, something that I've always been passionate about, which is with physicalness, right? With our body weight, with our health, right? With our fitness, all of the like. So that's one part. The other part is that I basically I've always got really uptight and irritated and almost obsessive about how weight loss has been approached. Typically, it's approached that it's a problem of fitness, it's a problem of nutrition, or both, and that basically is the solution as well. And the weight loss industry, the multi-billion-dollar industry, which as you know, Andrew, is growing leaps and bounds. I think
Yeah.
it's one of the fastest growing industries, definitely in North America, anyways. Well, obesity is one of the fastest growing epidemics, so they sort of go hand in hand, right? But let's face it, it's not working. They're not solving the problem, and it's because they're looking at it on a very surface level, and that's where most people look at it as well, on the surface level of, hey, listen, I need to work out more. I need to do something radical with my diet, and that's going to be the solution.
Yeah, a lot of the times
There's
it's
more to it.
you still hear so much like, oh, I need to go on a diet. And people think, once they get to a certain point, then it's over. Like it's this sprint, but it's not. It's a marathon.
Yeah,
Living a
yeah.
healthy lifestyle, getting fit, losing weight. It's something you do every single day until the day you die.
Well, how about this, Andrew? How about we look at it where how you take it off is how you keep it off.
Yep.
So
Yep.
completely contradictory to how we have been looking at it, where we just focus on taking it off. And that's where the weight loss industry comes up to satisfy that need. And they're doing a good job at that. I'm not saying that they're not doing the job of taking the weight off, because they are. They're just not keeping it off. We're
Yeah,
not
I
keeping it
forgot
off.
the statistic of how soon people put back on the weight, but it's crazy. It's really
Yeah,
sad, to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah. So, after several failed attempts, even with myself and with all the clients that I help, after several failed attempts of taking that approach, then perhaps it's time to take another approach where anything that you do today, okay, with the objective of taking it off, really should be on keeping it off, meaning that you would have to maintain that forever. Now, that's a scary proposition for most people. For example, okay, I'm going to include walking, for example, as part of my sort of repertoire of taking, or regimen of taking the weight off. Well, I'm telling you now, and you know this, Andrew, if you stop walking, right, then that's gone. And what's going to come back is probably the weight,
Yep.
right? And that could go with anything. For the diets, for example, okay, so you're going to eliminate carbohydrates completely, right? Now, ask yourself this question before you do. Can you do that tomorrow? Tomorrow means forever, right? Because again,
Yeah.
eventually those carbohydrates are going to creep back in, more than likely. And so is the weight. The weight's going to come back with it.
Yeah, you need something sustainable.
Exactly, exactly. So that's where I do things differently, and I've broken down it into facets, is what I call them. And it's sort of the analogy of the diamond. The diamond is created by facets. Facets let light in, and then they reflect light, right? And I think that's what we're all really looking for, Andrew. Somebody says, "Hey, man, I'm really depressed. I need to lose weight, et cetera, et cetera." And what they're really telling me is that they don't feel a lot of light and love in their life, and they're not able to express that neither. And that's really deep. I get it, I know, and that's not for everybody, right? But I'm talking about the people that have been suffering with their weight for a long time, and there's plenty of people out there like that. So that's really a feeling, right, that they're looking for. And that doesn't mean that taking 50 pounds off on the scale will give them that feeling. So to get that feeling, all facets basically have to be looked at. And there's 5 of them, and I call them fears. That's food, emotions, activity, relaxing, and sleeping. It's an acronym. And obviously fears has a deeper meaning to it as well, right? So, but on the surface level, those 5 facets, your food, your emotions, your activity, your relaxing and sleeping, they have to be balanced. They have to be managed. And if they all can be balanced and managed, then you can have a lot more light coming into your life, right? And obviously reflect that light out and live fully. That's what it's all about, right? Shine your brightest, have that success that you've been yearning for. It really is sort of an in and out kind of practice that we have to have in order to live fully, right? And shine brightly.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, having all five of those down is essential to living, really a fulfilling life, and not just, like you said, getting the weight off and, maybe being a couple inches happier, a couple inches, more satisfied, but thriving, but feeling great and shining, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what, Andrew, like I've been down to a 5% body fat. The words that would be used to describe me would be shredded.
I was just going to say
but brother, just like you were feeling right when everything was going well for you, it looked like everything was going well for me, but I felt like crap. I really did. And I wasn't shining at all. Right. I was struggling through. So yeah, you're totally right. Taking off some inches, taking off some pounds, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be happy. And in fact, if that was true, Andrew, the people that look at cosmetic surgery to give them, that the feelings of, well-being or to boost their egos or whatever, that's not happening. They've actually done studies on that, Andrew, where people are getting cosmetic surgery done and they're rating them emotionally afterwards, and their self-esteem has not increased. Why is that? They definitely think they look better, but it really didn't do anything to them on the inside.
I was just going to say that it's like, they're just trying to appeal to the external, to what other people think. And, maybe for a day, someone compliments you, that makes you feel good, but that's not, at the core, like you said, that's not really what matters. That's not really what inspires happiness.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. That is part of it, right? How we show up in life. But
absolutely. I mean, to deny that you don't want to look good. Everybody wants to look good.
Of course.
You look in the mirror every day and being happy with what you look at is a huge confidence boost.
What it really is, though, is it's basically what we've done for ourselves. That's why we show up differently.
Exactly.
Right? It's not just the fact that we're down 10 pounds, last month or whatever. It's what we did.
Yes.
That what we did is what empowered us. And that's why we're showing up more confidently to our friends, and people are seeing the glow and everything else, right? Like, Andrew, at my competitive days, right? Like I was looking drained, drawn out, depressed, although I had, shredded 6-pack abs. So there's the difference right there. So now I still got that 6-pack. Maybe I'm not 5% body fat, but I am glowing just about every day. That's the difference, because I know what I'm doing is good for me, and I'm doing it consistently and regularly, and every day I'm getting more power, and that's why people are noticing it.
Yeah, and that goes to say with anything in life, with your career, it's endless, the amount of people who make a ton of money, who have great jobs, but they don't love what they do. They're not doing something that fulfills that inner need and desire to have a purpose in life. Maybe they work with people they hate. They hate showing up to the office, and like you said, it's the same with fitness. It's that person, their career looks great, their money looks great, but on the inside, they're dying, they're depressed, they're not happy. And, for me, for anybody, like you said, who, you put up a new PR on bench press, on squatting, deadlift, whatever it is, it's like, it looks great to the outside world. That does give you happiness, but really what means the most to you is that, you put in that work, you got there every day, you put in that work, and that's what really makes you feel good. And that's what really shows out on your confidence and your happiness. And then in the professional side of it, when you're doing something that really means something to you, when it's purposeful and you're helping people, not only are you going to be working harder because it's something you care about, but you're going to be happy because of it. And it's not even going to feel like work half the time.
Yeah. And you just summed up my life, Andrew, right there. That's how I'm feeling today. I got some group coaching going on later today online, and that's basically what's going to feed me. It's going to fuel me, right? So again, that I can keep playing that higher level game that I might some days want to resist, because it's scary flying up there. You know how it is, Andrew. You're basically climbing right now. It gets scary up there, but it beats being at the bottom, because I've been there too. You've been there too, and that's why we keep climbing.
Oh yeah, and I think that's That's definitely essential to the champion's mindset. I mean, for me, I don't know how much I've talked about this on the show. I think I've written about it, but you don't know this, but so when I first graduated high school, I got into my dream university. I always had great grades, great test scores, and I decided to skip college to go pursue my dreams. And, it ended up being in a huge hole. That's obviously the short version of it. But the fear of one day looking back and saying, what if, the fear of never trying was so much greater than the fear of not going to school. I could always go back to school, but I would never get back that moment in my life where I could just give it everything I had.
Yeah, yeah. And you see what you're explaining there to me, how I describe it is it's the universe nudging you. Sometimes it's a poke, sometimes it'll give you a good slap across the head. And it's sort of that the repetitive voice that keeps, pointing in one direction that you don't want to go, and there's resistance there. But if there's no real sort of legitimate fear of going into there, like you're not going to get hit by a bus or chased by some sort of rabid dog or whatever, then that's really where you need to go. And again, sort of your soul is speaking to you, and it's saying, hey, listen, nudge, nudge, poke, poke, slap, slap. You need to go into that space. And really, there's nothing to be afraid of, right? There ain't no rabid dog in there, and there ain't no buses, going by at 100 miles an hour. So yeah, that's where we need to really be aware, and then that's where the sort of the relaxing time where perhaps you close your eyes, you just sit down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right, and sort of let yourself get into that space where now you can see where that false fear is, right? Because it's a load of crap, most of it, right? There really is nothing to be afraid of. We're not really in danger, right? Even if we failed, we would recover, even financially, right? Those kinds of
Yeah.
spaces, right, that we resist constantly. So I've really been acutely aware of where I'm resisting going, and that's where I need to go. That's my determination.
And that's the thing too, is like we said before, is these fears really behind them are the person you want to be. And once you start overcoming these fears, once you start putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations and you realize you had nothing to be afraid of, that's when life gets exciting. That's when you kind of figure things out and you're ready to go.
Yeah, Andrew, I was a pretty confident person before, but since I've published this book, something else has happened with me. Like, for example, on this podcast with you. Now, prior to launching this book and sort of, getting the empowerment from it that I have after its release, I would have been, if I can speak frankly with you, scared shitless going on this podcast with you. There would have been a lot of resistance, although my spirit would have been speaking to me and saying, hey, listen, you and Andrew got to get a conversation going, and you got to push it out there into the universe so everyone can hear it, whether they like it or they don't, right? It's going to
Yeah.
get out there kind of thing. So after, the time that I spent, the toiling that I did to get this book out, I'm having this amazing conversation with you today, and I'm getting power. I'm getting fueled up right now. So you're totally right. This is the spaces we need to spend time in, and boy, we just went up another notch, right, on this thing that doesn't have a ceiling.
It's just that momentum, that compounding of knowledge, of wisdom, of becoming a better person. It just gets better and better, and having that abundance mindset, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the opposite of the scarcity kind of mindset that they talk about so frequently, right? Where the gratitude, that's really what keeps me out of that scarcity, because we're all wired for it, Andrew. That's where we go by default, right? We go into scarcity mindset. That's where the ego comes up and says we need more, more, more. When in fact, here's the paradox of life, we actually need less, less, less. So, whoever created us, Andrew, they must be having a kick up there, or they're very frustrated with us. One or the other, I'm telling you, right? Because, we just don't see the paradox of everything, right? That less actually is more. And sort of what makes me come to that conclusion is my daily gratitude journaling.
I agree, man. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this on my podcast with Ben Austin. Ben's a mutual friend of mine and Chris's, but I was also on Ben's podcast, and I was telling him about a realization that I had that goes back to what you're saying about gratitude. Is one day I was hiking. Hiking's one of my favorite things, just to get out in the woods, get away from everything, and it was just the most perfect day. It was blissful. I couldn't get any better, and I was just sitting there And, I'd been stressed out about work, about my business. But I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, I was like, hey, if I was the richest guy in the world, if I'd achieved everything I'd ever wanted, it would make this day no better. If I was dead broke, if I was, the poorest guy in the world, it would not change this moment of how happy I feel because it's just a beautiful day.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, it frees you because then you're less stressed about things and you work better because you feel free.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The world keeps spinning around, but just for that hike, for that one beautiful moment, that beautiful day, you actually were there, right? You weren't somewhere else. You weren't living yesterday. You weren't living tomorrow, and that's where we forget where we are and what time of day it is, man. And you can go to Vegas for that too, Andrew, right? But the way we're doing it, brother, is definitely the way that has far less consequences, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, and it's hard for people who don't get there to understand, but once you do, it's amazing. And it's just, I can't stress that enough. But
Mm-hmm.
to get a little bit back more, just because you are so knowledgeable about, the fitness industry and nutrition and health, I was just kind of wondering, I'd love your opinion on where you see the fitness industry going in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. So, I use an 80-20 rule with the surface level stuff, right, which is the diet and the nutrition, right, and also the fitness or the exercise. And those two have been separated for a long time. In regards to there's professionals, practitioners that are practicing, nutrition, and professionals that are practicing exercise and fitness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we really need a hybrid. We need to have those two come together because 80% of sort of the surface level results anyways are always going to be from diet, from nutrition, right? It may be sort of less if you're the kind of the guy that's like the athlete and you're in there training 3 hours a day. But most of us, we're trained 3 days a week, for crying out loud. Most of the adults that have busy schedules like yourself, right? So with that said, you really got to put your investment into what's going to give you the biggest rate of return. And that's going to be the nutrition, right? So whatever percentage you want to put in it, it should just be the greater or the majority. So for these sort of fitness practitioners, the personal trainers, right, and the coaches and whatnot, they really need to become specialists in nutrition as well. And have stand beside the dietitians and the nutritionists and the holistic practitioners, and sort of be equals, so that people don't have to make that sort of the decision. Okay, well, I'm going to take the exercise route, or no, I'm going to take the diet route, because that's what's happening right now, Andrew. And really, they do need to be combined. You and I both know it. And for the fitness side of thing, we really need to adopt some professional practices with nutrition, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can't have one without the other. But like you said, nutrition is so important to not just what you look like, but how you feel. It's the thing about nutrition too, is there's no one size fits all.
Yeah, Andrew, and you're not going to find that kind of info. You're not going to make that determination on Google. You really need to speak to
No, you
someone.
got to go to a doctor.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And the results, they've done studies on this as well, as far as, when someone goes in to the doctors for an ailment and they spend, like, let's say 5 minutes with the doctor versus let's say, I don't know, maybe 50 minutes with the doctor, the results are outstanding in regards to sort of the cure rate. And all that is that human connection. It's that one-on-one. It's the conversation that the two of those have, right, that makes the biggest difference. It's not sort of like going online and getting a bunch of diets, right, or trying to figure out if you're gluten sensitive or not. It's really getting a professional that can have a conversation with you, listen to you, right, and what's going on in your life, and give you some personalized advice. And that's where the personal trainers out there, and I own a personal training club, as I'd mentioned, that's where they need to be these days.
Yeah, that's the weird thing too when you think about it with people, is when it comes to their health, so many of the times people just want to take shortcuts. They don't want to spend the money. They don't want to pay to maybe have a workout program, maybe to even go to the doctor. But it's like, when it comes to your car, most people aren't going to fool around with their car when, they got an engine problem. They're going to take it to a mechanic who knows what they're doing. So it's always kind of weird that when it's something like health, which is really omnipotent to everything, people take these shortcuts and they don't go to professional.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to what I was saying about intrinsic, extrinsic, sort of what's outside of us, right? All of our possessions, for example, and sort of other people, places, things, as I call it in the all-inclusive diet book. That's what we're focused on. And we pay little or no attention to what's going on in the inside, sort of like our thoughts, our emotions, what we're putting into our body, the food, for example, like how are we moving our body, the exercise. We're very unaware of that. And if we get motivated one day, we probably will go to Google, right? Or just follow what our friend is doing. But, very rarely will we actually go out there and get some professional advice, right? Like I am a coach, Andrew, but I told you in pre-show, I have a coach, right? So, there's a bit of a contradiction. You could look at it that way, but it's no contradiction to me, right? Because I'm a human being. And human beings need social support, and they need to share with other people that perhaps have a little bit more wisdom in life than they do. And that's where my coach comes in.
Exactly. You can always be getting better. You can always be learning more, and having someone hold you accountable,
That's it.
is much. That's the thing. I mean, it applies to everything, but especially like as an example in the gym, you can push yourself as hard as you want to think. But when you got some other guy screaming at you who won't let you stop, like that's a whole different side of accountability.
Yeah. And you know what, Andrew? That sounds scary. It really does, right?
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people would never move into that space. So choosing the right coach is important too, right? Because, maybe you don't want to go there right now, but just go there. Just put,
Do something, yeah.
do something. Put both feet in. Don't just put one foot in and do a Google search, right? Like put both feet in and get out there and have a real conversation with the real professional, real practitioner.
Absolutely. So we're wrapping up the show. I wanted to get into a few rapid fire questions. And
Sure.
the first one I wanted to ask you are, who are some of your favorite athletes and why?
Yeah. I just had this fascination with someone called Bo Jackson back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember that dude,
I
right?
wasn't, I mean, I'm too young to have seen him live, but just
Yeah,
from
you know what I
everything.
loved about him, man, is he was able to become a champion in two sports. And normally that is shied away from. It's not accepted. You're supposed to put all your eggs in one basket, in one event for the Olympics that are going on right now, for example.
Yeah.
But this dude actually, became a champion in two major league sports, and that's just incredible. And I'm really taking a different look at life now, and diversification, and dabbling in a few things, and not just thinking that, okay, I am a weight loss and wellness coach, for example. So I can't help someone out with their career, for example. Why not? Because a lot of the principles for athletics, for example, or for personal development, career development, for weight loss, they're the same, Andrew.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we can definitely diversify. We don't need to label ourselves. Life becomes a lot more dynamic and enjoyable for me anyways. So yeah, that would be an athlete that I always admired.
That's awesome. And then the next one is, I wanted to know this just personally, is can you tell us about your I Wish Ferrari program and what inspired you to start it?
Yeah, so that's an event that I hold close to my heart because it's for and it's about children, and I'm just sort of driven whenever it comes to charity. I always want to help children, so I go to schools, for example, and I speak to high school students about sport, about drug-free sport, about health, nutrition, fitness, etc. And that's where I sort of spend most of my time. And I just happen to be about 8 years we've had this event now. So 8 years ago, I was doing some cardio, and a client comes up to me and he says, "Hey, listen, I've got this child. He's severely disabled. He's got a dream to have a ride in a Ferrari sports car, right?" So I'm listening to this story, and so is another member doing the Stairmaster beside me. And he pipes up, he goes, "Well, I got a Ferrari." I said, "Okay, perfect." You know what I mean? So you got a kid, he's got a Ferrari, one kid, one Ferrari, one dream. Let's make it happen. And that's exactly what did happen. And in fact, it happened for 8 years. Now we're up to 100 Ferraris and 100 kids. I've got actually a brother-in-law and a good friend of mine, Alex Armelin, John Duca, that own Daytona sports cars. And basically they have the Ferraris, and I'm able to reach out to the community of special needs children, and we sort of come together with a perfect marriage, a perfect event. It's basically not to raise money, but to raise spirit for these children who have a tough go in life, right?
That's amazing, man. I can't commend you enough on that.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then, so the final question that we ask every guest on the show, for Kris Simpson, what is the one thing you challenge our listeners to change or do in their lives to become a champion?
Sure. Well, here's a question for that question, what's stopping you from being a champion? And it's actually a 4-letter word. It's called fear. So find that fear, okay? Develop practices which will allow you to uncover where that buried fear is, all right? And then step into it, right? That means breaking the silence. That means making a move. That means becoming very uncomfortable. And that's where the bubble is. And that's how you burst the bubble. And that's what I would say makes a champion.
That is awesome, man. Thank you so much for that answer and for being on the show today. Before we finish up, can you just tell our listeners where you can find, or where we can find all your work, your book, any programs, anything you're working on?
Yeah, so you can find everything on my website. So that's KrisJSimpson.com. That's Kris with a K, KrisJSimpson.com. And actually, what I'd like to do, Andrew, for your listeners is offer them a free book, The All-Inclusive Diet. Again, just got released last month. It's an Amazon bestseller. So I'll give them a free downloadable copy if they just would email me at Kris with a K, Kris, Kris at KrisJSimpson.com. That's Kris at KrisJSimpson.com. Give me an email, give me a shout. Let me know that you want my new book. I'll send you out a link. You can download it, read it. Get inspired. It is obviously about taking the weight off, but it's also about finding freedom as well and getting some balance in your life. So it'd be great for young entrepreneurs or, people in their family that perhaps have been suffering with obesity or just, being overweight and unhappy.
Wow, man. I mean, thank you so much for our listeners. That is an awesome deal. And once again, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was incredible.
Yeah, that was wild, Andrew. Thank you. Very inspiring.
And that was my interview with Kris Simpson. I can't tell you the number of times I got goosebumps during this episode. And I really can't say enough amazing things about Kris and the work he's doing. You can find all the show notes and resources discussed today, including where to find all of Kris's work, and also how you can get a free copy of the All-Inclusive Diet at www.firstfinisher.com. Once again, this podcast was brought to you by our brand new Champion Total Performance Powder. We designed this product for every type of athlete and to optimize all the basic needs of being a top performer. And you can find that on our website today. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to our podcast page on iTunes and leave a 5-star review. These reviews really help our show getting noticed and help us to spread our message. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you the best in your pursuit of becoming a champion.